this is number 11, right? Yep.
Yeah, you're on.
Number 11. So welcome back. Welcome you guys. Welcome to you that are online. And we're up to chapter 6, which is into action, which is going to talk about the 5th step, 6th step, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. So quite a few steps piled into a short chapter. And we'll kind of tear them apart a little bit, but probably not going to go into a lot of detail about, the 2 steps in the big book that have the least mentioned about them or least information are steps 6 and 7, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with them, a lot more than the book does, but I'll try to share with you at least some of what I understand about the differences between shortcomings and defects of character. So chapter 6, into action. Here we go. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator and discover the obstacles in our path. So I just would say that this new attitude, that relates to the spiritual condition, okay? We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items of in our inventory, personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. So it says nature of our defects instead of nature of our wrongs. A little different, huh? This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapters. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. That's a pretty good reason, huh? Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and their fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but he knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but a few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course, will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a close-mouthed, understanding friend. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Notwithstanding the great necessity of discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one is so situated that there is no suitable person available. If that is so, this step may be postponed only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. We say this because we are very anxious that we talk to the right person. It is important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we are driving at, and that he will not try to change our plan. But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory, and we are prepared for a long talk. So there's a clue. It's telling you that you're going to take your fourth step inventory with you to your fifth step. That's a significant piece of the fifth step, is sharing what you understand to be true about your resentments and your responsibility in those resentments. So I shared that with my sponsor, what I came to. And there were some things where he actually helped me see things and point out things to me that I couldn't see or didn't see. So you can't do that if you don't have that inventory with you. So it's not just about telling somebody else your life story, which is, I don't know how important telling somebody all of your life story is. I'm not sure that that's really the spirit of the step. I believe it to be that there were a lot of things that I was ashamed of. There were a lot of things that I felt guilty about. Shame, guilt, remorse, those things really controlled my life before Alcoholics Anonymous, before recovery, And so the object or the objective here for me, I believe, is number one, to take responsibility for what I haven't taken responsibility for, and to get rid of shame and guilt. And to get rid of guilt, the only path to relieve you of guilt is to become responsible. If you want to stop feeling guilty about something, you got to get responsible for it. Understand? But I was still ashamed of what I had done in many cases until I shared what I had done, the reason I had done it, and my understanding of the truth about it. When I shared that with my sponsor, that shame started to go away, because I found out, number one, that I was just garden variety alcoholic. There was nothing really special about me. There was nothing really special about all of these horrible things that I had done, that often I found that he had done them too, And so that's when I started to outgrow shame in my life too, was after I did my fifth step with my sponsor. You outgrow guilt when you take responsibility, You start to outgrow shame when you find in relating your life experience to somebody else that you're not unique, you're not the first person that's ever done this or it's ever happened to, and I'm okay. All right, so we explained to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and we go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. So there were other pieces of my life that I had shame and remorse and guilt even about, that things that I had never told anybody, that it was time to get that off of my chest, to stop carrying it around like I had. There were things that I thought I would take to my grave, and it was time to share that with my sponsor. And once again, the outcome was that I started to outgrow shame at that point. I stopped being ashamed. See, guilt says I made a mistake. Shame says I am a mistake. See the difference? And there were several situations in my life that there was no resentment in connection with them. I probably, in some cases, owed an amends, and it wasn't anything that was written on my inventory where I had done anything wrong per se. They were just things that I was ashamed of. Some of them were sexual in nature. Some of them were just pieces of relationships, things I had done, the way I had reacted to certain situations and relationships. Some of them were pieces where I had hurt someone, but unbeknown to them, they didn't even know I had hurt them. These are things that I needed to share. All right, so it goes on, it says, once we have taken this step withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look, this is the fifth step promises. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone and at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel that we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we look at step 6. So one example, and I just want to share this because it was significant for me. One example is I was molested by a Sunday school teacher when I was a kid, from the time I was probably 11 through maybe 13, 14, something like that. And I felt really guilty about that for a long time. And I didn't do anything wrong, okay? It was perverted, unacceptable behavior on his part, okay? And I don't know what was going on with him, and it's not my job to determine what was going on with him. But it was a tension that nobody else was giving me, and I was a scared, withdrawn, alone little kid, and I had this guy that started paying attention to me, okay? So, mind you, it was fucked up attention, but it was attention, okay? And I had to take responsibility for that I liked the attention, okay? So in my inventory, that's what I came to was the only, because we list our resentments. Well, I was resentful at him, for what he had done. But it says we resolutely turned our thoughts to what's my responsibility. Well, I wasn't at fault, but the thing that I was responsible for was I liked the attention and I kept going back, okay? I didn't report it. I didn't talk about it. I kept it hidden. I was ashamed of it. I was afraid. All of those things, right? So this was something that I had to share with I didn't have to, but I did share with my sponsor when I did my fifth step. And when I did that, it took its power away. It stopped having power over me. I mean, like sharing that today, it means no more to me than sharing that, I stopped at McDonald's on the way here. It doesn't have any power over me today because sharing it with somebody else took its power away. Does that make sense? Okay? And I stopped being ashamed of me. And I stopped being responsible for the part that I wasn't responsible for, too. So anyways, that's enough for that. So step 6, let's move on. It says, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? How can he take them away, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. So, what I'll say is that what I was taught in Alcoholics Anonymous was that my character defects were kind of primary. Let's put it that way. They were like the things that my shortcomings stemmed from. So here's an example. One of my defects of character, obviously, is fear, and self-centered fear. So often when I would get afraid of something, a situation, a relationship, of some interaction in a relationship with others, is often I would be tempted to lie, exaggerate, be dishonest with them about whatever the situation was. So the defect of character was fear, self-centered fear. The shortcoming was dishonesty, or sometimes it came out as anger. Sometimes it came out as an accusation, or accusing somebody of something they didn't do, deference, taking the light off of me, putting it on you. So that's what I was made to understand, the difference between defects of character and shortcomings. I don't know that you can, I don't know that I could ever be rid of all of my defects of character, okay? I understand them to be basic: self-centered fear, selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking motives, fear. Those I understand to be my defects of character, and my shortcomings stem from those. Does that make sense? Dishonesty, stepping on your toes. What else? Impatience is a shortcoming. Criticism is a shortcoming. Is that making sense? Well, that's the way I understand it. So in the prayer, I've asked God to remove from me these defects of character. But the steps say, what? So 6 says, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And then 7 says, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. So my shortcomings are typically where I hurt you, where I hurt other people. when I was dishonest, when I was angry, when I was defiant, when I was accusatory, accusing you of something, when I was critical of you. Do you understand? Is that making sense? So I ask God to remove that so I don't harm others. That's what I believe the steps, those two steps, to be about. So I hope that's helpful. It's there, the two steps that are the least talked about. It's a paragraph in the book. Dustin has got a good take on these. If you ever listen to him share about them, he's got some really good understandings about these ideas, and you would do well to listen to him share on those sometime. So, all right. So now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed. Where's that come from? Fourth step, right? We have a list of all persons we have harmed and whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident. Diffident means lacking confidence. We may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment, to go to somebody and say, hey, guess what? I got religion, man, and I'm sorry I hurt you. But Jesus is forgiven, right? It's probably not an amends, right? But I think that's what it's kind of talking about. It says we might prejudice them. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So I think that in that spirit, the idea is that if we are alienated from all of these people that we've harmed, and we seek this new way of life, we experience this miracle, we see the restoration of our life. If we're not able to share that restoration and that change with them, we've lost a significant amount of people in the world that we could be helpful to, right? So I think that's the spirit of this. I think that's what they're talking about when it says that fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. But our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than our talk of spiritual discoveries. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. That is it. Check it out. Think about it. Approach the man we hated, right? It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. Most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. I'm going to read that again. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditors will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense, which might land us in jail. If it were known to the authorities, we may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted that this is incompetence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up with the alimony to number 1. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. That hasn't changed much in 80 years, has it? Huh? Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding, reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience. We ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried because of resentment and drinking. He had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, how could he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course she did not, and the whole situation has been long since been adjusted. Before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, we have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. That's the second time it's said that. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those that depended upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His actions met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens in his town. This all happened years ago. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't want to have advertised. We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps he is having a secret and exciting affair with, quote, the girl, unquote, who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels remorseful at times, especially if he's married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell with him. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this is the best course to take. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as it is for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk a face-to-face combat. If we have no such complication, there is plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing you need to do is to keep sober. Certainly he must keep sober, but there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has shockingly treated, passing all understanding as the patients mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have had no homes today, would perhaps be dead. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came up out of the cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarks, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fit the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. I'll read that again. There may be some wrongs that we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. See, and I think that it's talking about making amends when it says that. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Not freedom and happiness, a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. Remember, we just talked about how we get rid of shame, guilt, remorse, and regret by taking responsibility, sharing it with another, making amends, changing things for the better when I can, where I can. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. This brings us to step 10. So I'll share, what time we got? Where we at? Oh,
38.
oh good, okay. So I want to share with you, I made my list of amends in my inventory, and after writing my fourth step inventory and sharing it with my sponsor, the next step was, the next job that I had was to write my list of amends. So my sponsor asked me to write 3 lists. One was the people that I owed an amends to, and I knew who they were, I knew where they were, I knew what I owed them, and I could make that amends. The second list was I owed someone an amends, I knew what it was, but either for the fact that I couldn't locate them, didn't know where they were, or I couldn't financially make the amends at that time, but I was willing to. That was the second list. And he said, and the third list is people that I probably owed amends to, and I would concede that I owe them an amends, but hell no, I'm not willing. And so what the book says is that it says that we pray until the willingness comes, right? I forget where that was. It seems like we should have just read that. There may, well, I was told that that list of people that I said that I'm not willing to make the amends to, that I would pray about that until the willingness comes. And that's what I did. And there weren't too many for me on that list. One was a guy that he was a good friend of mine, but there were a lot of drug transactions in our history, and I just wasn't willing to make that amends. I wasn't willing to do it. And I'll be honest with you, he's gone on, he's died, and he's gone, and I never made that amends. I wish him well. I would have changed it if I could have, but I was unwilling, and I couldn't change it. And so I don't feel bad about that. I don't feel guilty about it. I've never missed any sleep over it, and I pray for his soul. I pray for him, and I don't mean him any harm. I was pulled over. I was about 5 years sober. I was pulled over one day, and they ran my license, and I had an old warrant came up that I thought was gone, and it was out of Atlanta, Georgia, and it was a fugitive felony warrant for absconding. I ran from probation, I ran from prosecution, and they put me in the back of the car and put me in handcuffs, 5 years sober, and they called on it and they decided not to extradite, but I knew that day that it hadn't gone away, and I was 5 years sober, and I knew I had to take care of it. And I called my sponsor and I talked with him about it, and he said, well, you know what you got to do, and I said, yeah, I do. I've got to clear it up. So I called the probation department and I asked them what I could do to clear it up, and they said, you can come back and turn yourself in and serve your time. That's what you can do. And I said, what, isn't there anything else that we can do here? And I talked with them, with this probation officer, for about 2 or 3 months, and the best offer that they were going to come up with was 2 for 1. So I had 2 years, 10 months on the shelf, and they wanted me to serve half of that. And I had a business, I had a home, I had I mean, if I had gone and turned myself in, I would lose everything. There wasn't anybody else that was going to maintain anything like that. But I knew that, like the book says, it says we must not shrink. I knew that I had to take care of it. So the next year, I had moved back to Florida, and I wanted to get my Florida contractor's license, and in order to do that, I knew that I had to take care of this. So I was sitting at the computer one day, and I called an attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, and I talked with him about the situation. I told him who I was, what I had been doing. I said, I've been sober for 6 years, and I'm doing the right thing. Is there any way to get through this without going to prison or going to jail? And he said, I don't know. He said, but we'll find out. And over the course of the next 6 months, he worked with the probation department, and he finally got a way to get me into the court system, to get rearrested, to be processed, and for them to reinstate my probation and let me go. So I paid this man a lot of money, okay? But I've saved a lot of money not drinking and using too, right? So I paid this guy a lot of money to get me a real sweetheart deal, but that was what I could do. So you remember earlier when it was talking about, it says we should be sensible, tactful, considerate, humble, without being servile or scraping. And remember it talked about the guy that it wouldn't have been heroics if he'd have thrown himself before the judge and said, here I am, but he thought he could do nobody any good. So this path enabled me to continue to my life as it was, to continue to work, continue to make money, while taking care of my responsibility. And that's what I did. And I'm going to tell you, it was one of the hardest things I ever did in my life, was drive myself to Atlanta, Georgia, and turn myself in to that jail and walk into that jail on a fugitive felony warrant that was 10 years old, okay? That was hard. That was really hard. And it was okay, I was only in there for a week. I get it. Okay, that's no time at all. But at 7 years sober, that was significant for me. It was really, really, really emotionally. It really put me in a funky space for a while. I'll put it that way, as best I can say. It was almost traumatizing. It really was. But I took care of it. They reinstituted my probation. I served 19 months on probation. I ended up with the probation officer from hell. When I come into the office, she dropped me every time I came into the office. Every month she dropped me. She called me an offender. She said, "You're just another offender." And I'm like, I'm living a productive life. I've been doing the right thing for 7 years. She was not a friendly person, and her job had really scarred her. I feel sorry for her in a way. Just how negative in her outlook that she had on the world. But people like me make her that way, I'm sure. So anyways, that's my story. It was one of the hardest things I've ever did, but I knew that I had to take care of it if I was going to stay sober. All right. So step 10. Which suggests that we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, and set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. See, I think those are the primaries for me, right? When these crop up, we ask ourselves God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts on someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. So the whole process of steps 4 through 9 come into play in step 10. It's identification, it's understanding that I got a resentment, it's examining the resentment, what am I afraid of, what's my part, where am I at fault, where am I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened, what could I do instead? God, please help remove this fear from me or whatever it is, and if I've offended someone or stepped on their toes, I need to say, I'm sorry, I did this, and I apologize for my actions, or make it right however I can. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. So by the time we're actively making amends, that's when it suggests that sanity towards liquor should have returned, or whatever our drug of choice was. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react, so long as we keep a fit spiritual condition. And what's that? If I want to identify what my spiritual condition is, all I do is I look at how I feel about me, you, God, and life. If I'm feeling uncomfortable with, afraid of, angry at, upset with, discontented with any one of those relationships in my life, with myself, with you, with God, with life, my spiritual condition's compromised. I am not in a fit spiritual condition at that point. And if I'm in that condition, I probably don't want to place myself in risky situations, right? It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will be done, not mine. Not mine, be done. These are the thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. Much has already been said about receiving strength and inspiration and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when thinking is cleared of wrong motives. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers will come after we have tried this for a while. What used to be the occasional hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer, that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning meditation, we attend to that also. If not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we have been discussing. There are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer. As we go through our day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. we constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, where we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It works. It really does. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. But this is not all. There is action and more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12. So I don't take exception with many things in the book. One thing that it says we are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends, which I would agree with. It says we ask especially for freedom of self-will and are careful to make no request for ourselves only. I kind of take exception with that because I pray about relationships in my life. I pray about my marriage. I pray about my financial ability to meet my commitments. I don't find that to be selfish, okay? Praying for a better job or a better opportunity. Now, if you want to pray for Cadillacs and, and Maseratis and, $1 million homes and things like that, that might be the exception. But, praying for something that betters you in your life, I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I encourage that. I think that's what I value so much in my partnership with God today, is that I don't have to do this by myself and I don't have to make it happen. I pray for it. I sit back and I watch. I do what I can do moving towards that goal, and I let God fill in the blanks. And that's what happens. And something gets shifted around and all of a sudden, bam, there's the path that's laid out in front of me, and I just know that it's the unmistakable hand of God in my life, So that's a lot, huh? 5 through 11 in just about an hour. So any questions, comments, thoughts? No?
I will say, I found hearing it again when it says in the 9 step promises, I found a new freedom and a new happiness. When that was stated, I thought about it, and viewing what I perceived as freedom and happiness in addiction and now are two completely different. Happiness was when I found the substance that I was looking for, and the freedom was not being locked up. But that's not the case for me today. I feel free in the sense that I'm not bound to anything other than my own responsibilities and stuff like that. I just found that extremely profound.
Trapped in the addiction and the physical malady of the addiction, trapped in the lies and trapped in the game and that new happiness and being able to go to work and all. Obviously, work is a contract with an employer. I do this for you and you do this for me, but it's also that sense of satisfaction and personal achievement, that I never had before, So that's that new happiness and new freedom you're talking about, Absolutely. Thank you. Good stuff. All right. Well, I thank everybody for being here and being a part. And next week we'll do working with others, and that'll be our last week. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Lord.
Thank you.